second video back. I figured I would go back to my mainstays that I've been absolutely loving. Last time I was doing videos with both the Xenoblade for the first one back I just did with Iagus Wilderness, and now going into some more Clair Obscur, and super excited to see more of this, especially because I really want to play the game, and not really thinking of like streaming or recording the playthrough. It's something I've done years past, but not sure. Could potentially be convinced to do it though if enough people really wanted it. But for now, I just don't want to spoil any of the music. I've still spoiled almost nothing about the game, even past all the fame it's getting. Still know so little, and I've heard so little, and I'm saving it for the channel. So I really do actually want to get through a lot of it with reactions, as long as people still are enjoying them and looking for more of them. But plenty of suggestions lined up from the past, and this is one. I am not sure how it's pronounced. Verso, Verso in the American, if it's Verso or something. I have no idea. I do not know how to pronounce French at all. So I apologize. I'm just going to go with the American inflection of it and just call it Verso. I know that's probably, offensively bad, but at least I'm aware. Anyways, I know from the suggestion text that I've gotten in the past, because I keep track of all of it, that this is a piano forward or perhaps piano solo track. And pretty excited. It's not very long. I'm really curious just because the way this soundtrack is overall, the way that Testard is with kind of a very relatable life process to get to composing, like me. Not that I have done 1/100th of anything he's ever done, but I can very much relate to like the way he came to it later and like brought something to it that was his own. And just the overall feel of the other tracks I've experienced here. They're so pure, very classical. Like the bit of piano I've heard in some of them and even like played a little bit of for some of those videos. Like, it's really good, and very excited to see what like a whole track of piano might be for this game. Yeah, so let's get into it. Sorry for the long preamble, but you know me, that's kind of part of it. Just chapters are always available. I timestamp very extensively just so people can get through and watch the parts they want to watch. If they want to hear me talk or they want to skip through it, I hopefully give you control to do that and get what you want out of it. Anyways, I'm expecting I might pause and talk very quickly, as you know. That used to be how it always went. So we'll see if I make it more than 10 or 20 seconds. That's the challenge. Okay. Okay, so this bass is coming in, lower bass notes coming in around 13 seconds. Yeah, interesting playing so high up in the treble, such high octaves, with sort of the center of the piano just really positioned to the right, getting these super high keys that kind of have their own unique sort of sound. Totally depends on the piano, and of course the recording engineering and the mixing, but especially the instrument. The very lowest bass notes, but probably even more so the highest treble notes, sound the most different from instrument to instrument. There's a lot of character, not necessarily good character, like not always like the more different it sounds, the better. But like you'll really hear a lot of difference in like oddities of how those high notes sound. Sometimes they're very hollow, sometimes they're very ringing. Oftentimes there's a certain number of notes at a certain, at the very edge of the piano, maybe the last 5 notes or so, depends on it, that will automatically have like an echo when they're played, no matter what, just because of the way the strings internally work. But it depends, and when you're aware of that, you can use it when you're performing or even composing, but it's kind of weird to compose for like a certain piano. But if you're composing to have a specific recording be like your real composition rather than the score, then you might actually be taking advantage of that instrument. And here, yeah, it has a very certain character. But we are having bass notes come in where I paused it, and I guess we might get 3 different layers. It brings a bit of a question to me, like, is this a piano solo track or a piano only track that is not necessarily a single performer doing it the way you'd play a normal piece. I'm going to assume by far most likely it is a piece playable and played by a single person. But when it brought in that bass note, I was like, oh, are we doing like kind of 3 layers? Like this could be a piano 4 hands thing, or a piano duet, or a multi-track recording, which is totally fair game. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a track that would be not exactly as you would play a normal composition by one person. That's just as interesting. I'm just thinking about the physical mechanics of it. Yeah, a little bit of counterpoint with contrary motion, which is always very strong. If you're composing, contrary motion, counterpoint, great thing to lock onto. It might be more than solo. The end of this phrase. Ooh, great harmony to end on here, this cadence. Kind of a half cadence before this high note enters the next phrase, but really kind of a muddy, not super straightforward minor sound, or it could just be the richness of the bass notes. But just the reverberation there is so great. Low bass notes on a piano are my favorite sound in the world. They are the best thing, period. And there's lots of that here. We get the lovely echo. Really, this piece is using the low register and high register of the piano much more than pieces typically do. And I think that makes a lot of sense because in previous tracks for Clair Obscur, I've had reactions where it feels so clear that in the music, even in the video, there's like so much interplay of light and shadow. And that was my analysis, not really realizing anything else about the game or the title. People pointed out that's like literally the title, or related to things like, is it called what, chiaroscuro? Something like that. The like visual technique with shadow. But that it probably plays into the game's themes a lot, I would guess. I've not been spoiled at all. But even like the art, like the design of like the logo, it's like gold and black, and there's so much light versus shadow that I'm not actually surprised and feel like it's very fitting and very satisfying for a piano solo track in the game to really be using the lowest and highest notes in a way that is a little bit abnormal compared to like the typical range of what piano compositions use. It's less frequent to use those. Again, they're always fair game and they do get used plenty, but just not that commonly. And for that to be like primarily what's going on here, it clearly has 3 sections. I still am not sure if it's a solo piece. I will attempt it and probably record and add a little clip of me attempting it. I'll figure out later, but for the reaction in the moment, I don't know. It definitely sounds like there's 3 sections, like a low, middle, and high. Very much something that would be played piano 4 hands is my immediate guess, but I'm also biased as somebody who has written piano 4 hands. Like, I'm hearing it that way. Yeah, it's so much doing that contrast of shadow and light with the low notes, the deep rumble bass layer that got added at 13 seconds, and these very high treble notes that are the light just kind of tinkling and just keeping that wide contrast, but having the middle to have like some firm ground to stand on as well. And possibly this character, I'm guessing Verso is a character, the one that's pictured on screen. Could be totally wrong. It could be a place, could be an enemy, a concept, but I'm going to guess it's a character because it sounds like a name. And possibly they particularly have the contrast of shadow and light. It looks like they have a, bit of a silver or white streak in their hair and the rest is dark. That's also light and shadow. But yeah, it's clearly in the way the piano is used, it's doing light and shadow. I also wanted to just comment before going back. It starts doing kind of, nothing is really slowing down, but it starts doing quite like consistent bass notes at a very comfortable, what would you call it? Comfortable pacing, cadence, I guess. Well, that's a misleading term because I want to use cadence here in the term of like the timing pacing of a recurrence of something, like the cadence of like an interaction of you texting somebody. But cadence is such a musical term that refers to like how a phrase resolves its tension and harmonies used. So I probably shouldn't use cadence in that sense. So anyways, the sort of interval timing that it sets these bass notes becomes really consistent and structural and feels very comfortable once it begins. So I'm going to back up to maybe 20 seconds ago and go back. Yeah, the bass note just plants itself every measure and is very comfortable. And then we get this great cadence on that low minor harmony. Leave out the bass section for this. Back to the original combination. Back to this light balance from the start. Yeah. Really just little slivers of light streaming in through the window, through the leaves. Okay, gonna stop it here. I assume we're getting a little bit more detail. Piano's starting to get slightly more complicated for the first time. One thing I do want to stop and talk about a little bit is that while this doesn't sound Baroque necessarily, it doesn't necessarily sound like Bach or Scarlatti, it does, though, do what Baroque music is often doing and is worth talking about a little bit, just because I think it's interesting. Frequently, this piece is doing note for note in the different sections. Let's say we ignore the bass section, really, which is kind of doing like a, if you know, like a cantus firmus, in like church music with laying down the long notes under the moving ones above. It's kind of doing like a cantus firmus bass. Which is also kind of the most common form of bass. That's not like an obscure thing. It's just like the lineage of why it's a thing is very interesting when you go back to early music history and some terminology from that. But as far as looking at the middle and high section, they're often doing note for note. There's a little bit of variety, some little holds, some that are a little bit quicker, but mostly it is note for note, one for one, and kind of like sometimes it's called like a perpetual motion sort of piece. There's some like classic like Weber things that sort of coined that term a bit. Ones that are a little bit of showpieces. This is not a showpiece at all. It's not, encore flashy thing, but it has that perpetual motion sense, which again, you find a lot in Baroque music, in Bach, certainly in things like fugues, although this is not a fugue, but it has a little bit of that feel because of this note for note, just continual constant motion. Very different from a piece that's going to have a push and pull of timing. It's going to have, these treble piano phrases are going to have like, a sense of rubato, and it's going to play a little bit, have a little open space, different note durations, totally different kind of piece. And it may not sound Baroque, but it does in that way. And I'll play a little bit to give an example. Like here's when it goes more to it's interesting actually, when you go to only the middle and high, the middle section becomes more like the bass. It's doing the sort of cantus firmus, like longer notes to sort of plant the harmony per measure. But there are other sections. Let me see if I can find one. Yeah, like here. You can hear it's very one for one most of the time. Not strictly. There's still compositional variety. But it is that approach oftentimes of kind of note for note between these two voices, you would call them, two voices. they're oftentimes playing notes at the same time. It's not always is there a note present for both, but they're pretty much lining up or missing from every little subdivision. And the other of the two elements that I think make it feel really Baroque is that when you are doing this kind of note for note, I actually forget what species of counterpoint this is. There's a thing you end up learning in like theory of species counterpoint. But regardless of what number of species the, very note for note like this is, which are fun exercises to do if you start learning. But the important thing is that this is super counterpoint heavy, because when you're doing so frequently lining up notes between different voices, it is inevitable that you're going to run into like kind of little traffic jams, or like they're going to intersect in odd ways. That vertical slice of the harmony, the way that interval sounds between them, is oftentimes going to be like accidentally dissonant, or there's going to be like an unpleasing sense of like, you're going to get perfect fifths or octaves moving in parallel motion, and it's just going to sound a little You can do it. Music theory teaches usually like, avoid them at all costs, and you're going to get marked down if you're in a class, and but whatever, like you can write music any way you want. You can write classical music and break all the counterpoint rules, like who gives a fuck. But the reason they exist is because they did kind of figure out what sounds more pleasing, not pleasing in terms of like happy, like to write nice sounding music, you do it. Pleasing, like just pleasing to the ear, period. It teaches good approaches that you can break, but it's one of those situations where it's kind of nice to sort of learn the rules before you break the rules. You certainly don't have to, but that's more the way I feel like it works. You're definitely meant to break counterpoint rules. Bach does it all the time, even though it's like a lot of it's drawn from him. He breaks all these rules that you learn in theory. But it gives a central structure to kind of just know what sounds good. It just, some good sensible rules to stop having things that sound kind of awkward or just not great. And it's so constant that you're dealing with that challenge when you're having constantly lined up notes. It's frequent possibilities for those to be awkward. So this is doing the Baroque challenge despite not having the same harmonic sense. So it doesn't quite sound like it immediately, but structurally, yes. Because it's constantly having to deal with counterpoint challenges in this way because of the way it's structured. And it's doing it great. And one of the things you hear oftentimes is a little bit of very clear contrary motion of a few notes, note for note, moving in opposite directions between these voices. And I alluded to it earlier briefly, but one of the best possible things you can do when you're doing counterpoint is contrary motion. It basically always works. It almost never breaks any rules. Certain beats you could be off and have it be weird, but it's one of the safest, most reliable structures to use, which sounds boring, but there is absolutely a craftsmanship to making music that is not all that glamorous sometimes. Just how do you make it sturdy? How do you make the bones good? And one of those ways is, not breaking counterpoint conventions too much unless you feel good about it and you like how it sounds. And one of those conventions is this contrary motion. There's many reasons why it just works very well. And it's constantly happening in this piece because it is a very, very good solution for the problems that this brings. On the whole, of course, Lorien is just, he's not making mistakes with this at all. Of course, it's a different vibe than Baroque music, but he's successfully navigating all of these possible challenges you have. It takes careful attention to not make it sound messy, very messy. This same track could sound so much worse without a talented hand making sure this counterpoint is working. So anyways, that's end of this ramble, end of this tangent, but it is all for the point of saying I appreciate what's going on in this track. It's very good. And I like that. It reminds me of Baroque music indirectly. But here we go. We'll continue and get to the section where it gets a little bit more complicated. Sometimes a little parallel with some intervals, but they sound good. Oh, beautiful bass note. There we go. Lovely run. I've got to stop it. I can't pause it though. All right, end of this phrase. All right, so here we get really into the piano solo. I'm sure people have, if they've watched so far and not skipped around, they're like, man, you are analyzing way too much before it really starts. Just listen to it. Get to the point that's really cool. You're overanalyzing the start. But you know what? I think the rest is, also important section of the music. I don't feel too bad about any kind of overanalysis too early. But clearly this is very interesting. Having this constant, continual, you could call it a run. I don't really like that terminology for piano though, because I don't know, then you'd be saying, oh, there's a bunch of runs and all kinds of things. It's very natural for the piano, so I feel like other instruments make more sense to call things runs in situations where they're less organic. The piano can do it all the time, so I don't know. It's just more of a connected phrase. But yeah, doing a lot of scalar motion, occasionally doing a little bit of chromaticism. There's moments where that chromaticism makes it sound a little bit Chopin-esque, particularly what we just heard. And, Chopin is a very French spirit. I mean, obviously Polish spirit even more. But as far as inspiration for piano, that is very French. It's kind of hard to do better than a little bit of homage to a Chopin vibe, which is not overall going on in this track. It mostly sounds really nothing like Chopin. But some of the little chromatic half steps that are going on in these runs, I guess, I guess I do have to use the term, in these runs sometimes are indeed a little bit reminiscent. But it's a great section, definitely fun to play. Not incredibly hard, but a little bit. And just great, resonance throughout the whole register of the piano, really getting the dark and light at the same time. Just these strings of glimmering beads that we're getting now with still the dark, shadows in the room and the bass. Definitely seems like, again, more than piano solo. It definitely sounds like a piano four hands piece or duet. But that's very cool because there aren't that many pieces scored that way. And again, I could be wrong, but I want to listen to this whole part again. Going to be a long reaction, but I've done longer for a 3-minute piece. I've done longer. Anyways, let's see if I went back to the right point. Probably. Yeah, right there. It does remind me of something more than Chopin for sure. It might be Mendelssohn. A little more Mendelssohn. I love these like on-beat trills. Some of that's in Bach as well, but it's like they simulate a trill, but they're really still, beat for beat. Love that harmony and that phrase again, like earlier. A little bit more like jumpiness up and down, even in the higher area. I love that the little chiming when that part comes in with the double note up there, right there again. I love the usage of just hitting that super high note twice each time. It just hammers that chime a little more. I'm going to listen to this part again. But I'll finish out first. Nice little ritardando at the end. Feels right. Okay, I'm going to listen to the ending of it once again because I didn't fully get everything. Definitely gradually decrescendoing. I love the amount of space there. I just love, it doesn't wait for the very end of the piece to do that. It hasn't quite done the little tail of the piece It hasn't yet finished its little denouement, but it gives this almost like kind of with some finality, this space. And I just love it breathing for a second there, taking a deep breath before saying its final words. I really like that. Right here. I really appreciate that. And that's just a little climb down. You know, just this monophonic single voice left. Only one voice left in the room, and it's more so the light than the dark at the end is the thing that has the final say. So I guess we get some light and some peace in the end after a bit of a battle with the darkness. That's kind of my take on it. Anyways, thank you so much for that recommendation. I do love hearing what's done with piano solo tracks. I've just listened to and curated and analyzed so much classical piano music that I always have a lot of thoughts about it. It's very fun. To me, the world has room for plenty more original piano music. I'm not at all the type of person who thinks kind of everything's been written or has to be a certain thing to have some kind of value. I think there's plenty of space to write things that seem original, even if they are utilizing certain style. Like, they can be blending, they can be themes and harmonies and cadences that haven't really been done that way before. So I'm always down to like appreciate new classically composed or composed anyway, but classical is not really a true definition of anything. It's super broad. It could be anything, but you know, what people think of as classical, things done in that way, especially solo instrumental, solo piano, by far my wheelhouse. I'm always interested to just like meet them on their own terms and analyze them just from the perspective of what the instrument can do and has done and what's going on, but appreciating it for its own sake, rather than thinking it has to be some rung on a ladder that, you know, you're never going to reach some established pieces that are done a certain way. You have to qualify somehow, or like it's not interesting, or that neoclassical is like a waste, just retreading old styles and it's all genre now. Don't think like that at all. I am just not one of those people. All that to say, I really did appreciate this recommendation and I really did enjoy it and I thought it was great, which was probably obvious by the amount I rambled about it. And yeah, I would love to put it on the playlist. And I think, despite the fact that the solo piano ones could totally be categorized as, you know, some sort of emotional or atmospheric content, I do like, though, having the few solo piano tracks I've done in their own playlist. I really think that makes a cool playlist. They could all be different vibes. Maybe that could be jarring, but I think just compared to all the different instrumentation and game music, it's kind of nice to have a playlist of just game music that is only piano. Of course, you know, there are games that are like almost exclusively piano, like Breath of the Wild, or if anybody has played the game I Am Setsuna, one of the first kind of spiritual successors to Chrono Trigger, that game was a little bit bold in doing an entirely solo piano soundtrack. So there's games like that are going to add a lot to this category, but I think it makes sense for now because there's only been a few that have come up. Yeah, so I'm going to drop it here. Let me make sure this is on screen. Yes, it is. And this was Verso. Ah, yes. Explain. What does it do if I say explain Verso? If it knows what it is, it's gonna... Oh. You know, I was doing this as a complete joke, because I thought it'd be ridiculous, but... knows it's a piece from Exposition 33, no spoilers. Verso can refer to a left-hand page of an open book, or the reverse side of... Oh, like reverse. Verse. Yeah, okay. Well, that's kind of interesting. I'm kind of glad I did that, because it was talking about how the whole game, and especially this piece, is totally light versus darkness, and if the name even implies a reversal, implies a contrast, We almost like went from dark to light to the end. Well, we kind of started at light, I guess, but eventually the light kind of won. Yeah, okay. That's kind of interesting. I thought that was going to be a joke. Maybe it would like spoil something about the game and I'd have to click off it, or just like be a failure, but kind of interesting. And to be honest, if I wasn't just getting back to the videos, I would be doing some of my own research like that beforehand too. Never spoiling games, but looking up a little bit about like titles. If you've seen past videos of mine, you know, sometimes I go into like the language or the translation of a title, prep a little bit about the composition or the composer sometimes without spoiling the music or the game. Currently keeping my workflow a bit simpler, but I am going to see if I can record playing a little bit of this piece. Remains to be seen. Maybe I cut this, or maybe you hear me say this and I did not end up doing the piano. But I'm going to try. I'll add it if it goes well. And thank you again for watching. I will see you in more videos, hopefully. Excited to be listening to some great music again. Much appreciated. Until next time.